Evening booktube, it's Tony here from Locks to Reads, just giving you an update on what I've read this week. Four of them are hard copies. One of them, which I'll do last, was a library book which I've had to return, which yeah, um, not quite as dramatic as last week's, but these are, again, this looks like a lot of books, and again, I'm not sure why I'm making apologies for this, but really only one of them is a big chunky one. So we'll start with what should we start with? Let's start with I read The Sorrows of Young Werther by Goethe, or Goethe. I'm never quite sure how to pronounce his name. Again, I'm annoyed that I'm not pronouncing things properly. I'm sure there are Germans out there that will tell me how you do it correctly. This is short. It's mostly an epistolary novel, with some diary extracts and a sort of end summary by. Anyway, this was a revolutionary book at the time, because it was so self focused on one man, and it's an exploration of the a young artist trying to cope with the real world and with falling in love with someone who is already engaged to and marries another man. It's it had a real impact across Europe at the time, and it's sort of one of the kick-starting things for romanticism as a novel. It's very well written. I mean, obviously, I'm reading a translation here. It was translated by Michael Hulse, and it has who writes the useful introduction. Um, it's very good, but I found myself at the end thinking that our hero, Werther, um, is is a bit of an arsehole, um, which I think is probably not the point that Goethe was trying to make. Uh, I the way toward there's going to be some spoilers now for a 300-year-old book. So well, it's not quite 300 years old, but whatever. Um, Werther commits suicide, and um, the way he writes the way he behaves in the lead up to it, I think disgustingly puts the blame is probably not quite the word, but almost on his not love Lottie, and her um, friend, um, sorry, and her fiance Albert. Um, Albert's crime. He's just a normal bloke. He's not a sensitive artist. Um, Unlike Werther, he can't love Lottie like the Werther would. Um, my feeling is Werther is exactly the sort of bloke whose love would burn bright in the first year of a marriage, and then you get bored and you end up shagging the maid. Um, I'm very judgmental about Werther, which is probably a bit harsh. He's just a very oversensitive man for the times, and he can't cope. There's a quote from Clive James, which I meant to look up before this, that says something like, "Men who fall in love easily would do themselves the world a favour by not doing it, and women, and particularly women, a favour by not doing it." Yeah, I like the book. I feel a bit like this, like I did do about Wuthering Heights, which is I can see why the book is I can appreciate the craft, um, but I find the people in it annoying and uh, infuriating. Um, in the modern world, maybe somebody would have reached out to help Werther, um, but not in this book. So yeah, book one. I went on about that a bit longer than I thought. Then I read in my ongoing Hayne series read along. The Word for the World is Forest by Ursula K. Le Guin. Love Ursula K. Le Guin. This is another one of her books. Again, a bit nice short one. This is another one of her books that I really enjoyed. This one's the most her world building. The best thing about Ursula Le Guin normally is her world building, and her writing's great. Her world building is usually superb. And again, this one is more obviously a. I was about to say parable. Let's say parable about Vietnam. There's an introduction. There's two introductions to this book. Well, there's a forward and an introduction. One is by Ursula K. Le Guin herself, who talks about why she wrote the book, and basically says, "Look, this was a Vietnam War allegory. It's probably a bit unsubtle, and it's basically about how colonization is has an impact both on has a it is bad for the colonizers. It makes them cruel, and it helps them to be cruel if they can dehumanize the people they are colonizing. But fighting colonization can also have a detrimental impact on the culture that is fighting it, because they have to take up the weapons of their oppressors to defeat them. Really like this one. I'll be a bit short about this one. Really like this one. Recommend this. Next one on the Ursula K. because I'm doing a Hayne read along, and the next one on the list is The Dispossessed. So I'm looking forward to reading that. But I enjoyed this one. And it's got a great title up there with Flow My Tears, The Policeman Said, for me, as good titles. Another science fiction book next, Kurt Vonnegut's The Sirens of Titan. I've got a bit. I had a bit of a. This I enjoyed this again. It's very strange. But I like it. It's dryly funny. It's satirical. As Ursula K. Le Guin says in the introduction to her book, the science fiction is often a good method to attack the society you live in a way that can be quite subtle. This is sort of partly that, but it's partly a very interesting science fiction novel. It's not. It doesn't. The world. It's a straight. It's a. I really enjoyed it. I found it very funny. I also liked the way things became more odd as the book went on. But it's very good, this book, on how much luck plays a part in how people become rich and poor. And I suppose fundamentally, this book is basically about basically saying that rich people are rich just by luck, not by hard work, which might be a bit harsh on some rich people. At least one person in a rich person's family was probably quite a hard worker. It's the ones that come after the hard workers that are always the problematic ones. Or rich people are thieves. Which brings me on to Reprobates. The Cavaliers of the English Civil War. I'm trying to get that so it doesn't. The Cavaliers of the English Civil War by John Stubbs. This is a history of the. Well, it starts before the Civil War breaks out, goes through the Civil War, comes out the other side, and goes all the way through to the Glorious Revolution of 1688. But it's told through the biographies and writings of various Cavalier poets, writers. I mean, there's a lot in this book where it seems like everybody was writing some poetry at this point, who had wealth, money, and time. This and it covers a lot of ground. It also talks about a few non. I mean, it talks about Milton a bit in here, and Milton is absolutely not a Cavalier. It did make me want to read more. Actually, get around to finally reading Paradise Lost, which I've had on my list forever and a day. But it also made me want to read a lot. And the reason I picked this up was I read a anthology of Cavalier poets, which I found really interesting. So I picked this up because I wanted to see what find out a little bit more about all of them, which this book does very, very well. It sort of ties in their stories, their writing with with a narrative, with a history of what happens in Britain in the run up, because we says English Civil War here, but actually fundamentally it's a Scottish war, Scottish wars, Irish wars, and English civil wars. It's very good on how it's very good at sort of sewing the literature into the history. He uses a lot of interesting quotes from the writers themselves. He doesn't actually change, modernise the spelling or anything, which can be a little bit mildly annoying. It's fairly straightforward most of the time, but you find it's one of those things where it just holds you back a little bit. But you don't mind after a while, you get used to it. But uh, and it's very fair as well. Stubbs is not does his best to not be judgmental about most of these people. Even Charles I in this book comes across. I mean, he's always hapless Charles I in my head, but he comes across as a much better person from this book than he does from a lot of books. And Stubbs always tries to be fair about people's motivations and actions, negatively and positively. There's three main characters. There's three main people that this book is sort of built around: John Suckling, William Devenant, and Hyde. And something Hyde. I can't remember what his first name is now. Who became the first Earl of Clarendon. Those three are the sort of threads, the main threads through the story. But there are other people mentioned in here. You might know Isaac Walton. I mean, there's loads. It talks about Shakespeare. What this book does make you realise is the thread of English poetry that sort of goes like Shakespeare, the Cavalier poets, Donne, Dryden, Milton, Marvel, and it also talks a little bit about both Hobbes and Locke as well towards the end. If you don't know much about the English Civil War, this is might be an interesting way to start. It's not an out and out history though. Let me recorrect that. It's not an out and out narrative history of what happens. It's a bit more complex than that. But if you're interested in the sort of cultural history of the English Civil War, and it's sort of what happens before and what this is good. Now, the final book what I read was The Four Loves by C.S. Lewis. I've had a problem with C.S. Lewis ever since I came down on the Tolkien side of things. I never quite understood how his world building never made any sense to me, because it was just, let's pull in everything from, we've got Santa Claus, we've got Jesus as Aslan, and so his fiction never. And I've sort of picked through a couple of his other sort of popular Christianity books. There's probably a better phrase there. But I really didn't like this book at all. I really didn't like The Four Loves at all. Particularly the chapter on friendship, because I felt that it was so male focused. He says, "Well, I'm a man, and all my friendships are male, so I can't really do it," which is fine. But the way it talks about friendship is so chaps together that I think it undermines his basic thesis about basically how all types of friendship. There's the four loves. The four loves are basically sort of. I've got to remember what they are because I haven't got the book in front of me now, which is annoying. They're basically friendship, erotic love, and love of God, and there's one before that which is sort of general I'd almost call it acquaintances, but that's not quite the word he uses. But it sort of fell apart for me on the friendship chapter. I am not enough of a religious person. My religion is probably agnosticism. I can't quite say I'm an atheist, but I just felt that it was, I don't know, there was something about it, the whole and the style of it. It just felt like he was patronising, patronising me as a reader rather than um, being honest. Now I know that a lot of people find C.S. Lewis's, but these kind of books by C.S. Lewis uh, fascinating, and I would like to. I'm not saying I wouldn't want to read more, although at this point I'm not in a rush to read anymore. Um, but yeah, there's an issue with C.S. Lewis and that book. This isn't really a fair review because I'm more sort of, yeah. I can't. I think sometimes when you don't like when it's hard when you don't like a book to be fair to a book. Um, I don't think with the young Werther, um, the source of young Werther. Um, there were reasons I found the main character in that annoying, but I found the book very good and very well written. With C.S. Lewis, I didn't find it. I didn't think it was that well written. I didn't think it was that persuasive, um, and I didn't. And I found the whole tone of it. Maybe I don't like C.S. Lewis. Maybe I just don't like C.S. Lewis. Maybe my teenage pro Tolkien um, feelings that C.S. Lewis basically listened to Tolkien tell his stories and then went, "Oh, I can do that," and then wrote worse books. I never read that. I never read any of the Lion and Witch of the Wardrobe books when I was a kid, which is weird because you'd have thought it would have been in my wheelhouse. Um, so yeah, maybe I'm just anti C.S. Lewis. You never know, but I'd probably need to read more before I could definitively say that is true. Um, that's gone on a bit longer than I intended it to. But yes, that's my reading list for this week. Um, Next week, more reading. I have started to put out my plans for 2025. What I'll do is I'll do a video next week on my favourite books of 2025, 2024. I'm not psychic. 2024. I'm going to split it into fiction and non-fiction, and I'll do 10 of each probably. And then I'm going to do a book on what I'm going to try and read in 2025. And I'll do my usual what I've been reading catch up. So I hope that was all interesting to you. I feel sometimes that I'm waffling on, but I hope any questions, put them in the comments. If you don't like this video, don't tell me. I don't care. I do care, but I don't want to care. And thank you very much, and we'll catch up later. Bye bye.